I want to tell you how grateful I am, though, to represent unity. I was buying some gasoline in a little faraway gasoline station somewhere. I've been driving up and down that Highway 5 for the last 2 years. I make it in 3 hours, and it isn't my fault, it's the car. And anyway, I stopped at this gas station, and I don't know whether Sheena's here tonight. Are you here, Sheena? She sometimes is here on Wednesday, but she takes care of fingernails at Perfect Nails. So I have an excuse when it's self-service. I always ask someone to help me. It's a nice way to get acquainted with good-looking men too. But anyway, I went in and I asked at the little store, I said, can someone help me get the gasoline? And a woman said yes, she'd help me. So she came out, and afterwards I went back in and gave her my credit card, and she said, after she made out the check, she said, now if you'll just sign it and put your license number on it, please. Well, at that time, which was last year, I was driving a personalized license, and it was Unity 7. So I wrote Unity 7. And all of a sudden she said, Unity? Big smile on her face, and she just got all full of glow and light. And she says, I was just about to leave for the day, but I'm so glad I didn't. I got to help you. And I thought, I know very well she wouldn't have done it if I'd have worked for Campbell Soup. It's because we represent something that is so big. Every single one of us. And I often say I'm too big to be little. And if I don't remember that, Phil helps me to remember it. Let me tell you just a few things about unity that are, I think, very distinguishing features. One, we have a certain song that's our song, not a song like Christy sang. Incidentally, Christy, when you sang that beautiful lullaby, where is she? Did she leave? Anyway, I thought, where are you, Christy? Oh, you got over there, all the way over there. You walked right across the front. Shows she's in show business, doesn't it? Anyway, Christy, when you sang that song, I thought, oh my goodness, those CEPers, they're all so tired and they're all going to go sound asleep. That's a beautiful song, though. But it is said that a mockingbird, and we have mockingbirds in this area, that's a delight to have a mockingbird in your area. We used to have, when we lived in Carmichael, we had a chimney that a mockingbird would sit on almost every day and sing all these little songs, meow, meow, like a cat, like a dog, and all the things they do. And it says they have 30 plus imitations. 30 plus imitations. Now, a robin has its own song, and we all know a robin when we hear it. We all know a crow when we hear it. I used to say to people, we can all sing. We can all sing like a bird, even if it's a crow. But unity has an identifying song and something to crow about. The first point we all know real well. It is there is only one presence and one power active in my life, God, the good, omnipotent. One presence, one power. When we were in Bali a few years ago, I discovered that they were receptive to a rather primitive belief, which is that there is equal power in good and evil. And those of you who have been in that part of the world, I'm sure you're aware of that. The thought is that the river which drowns his brother does it on purpose. Lightning searches for him. He must buy favor for both powers. And it was interesting that like we get on a bus to go, sightseeing, and up by the driver would be a little, like a little frond of fern, and then some fruit and flowers on this side. And over on this side was another, almost the same, probably the same on that side. Most of the homes and most of the shops had the same thing, two of them. One was for the good spirits and one was for the not so good spirits. And we didn't want to, we had to play those equal. Now, in unity, we believe in the one presence and the one power. And for 56 years, I've been saying it, and I believe I'm finally getting it. One presence, one power. When you really, If thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. And it's that single eye that really blesses our lives. I was in Monterey a couple of weeks ago, and there was a woman visiting from the Middle East, not the Middle East, but the Middle East of the United States, like Iowa or someplace like that. It's your fault. And anyway, I was in the front seat, and her friend, who I knew real well, she got out to go in to make reservations at a restaurant or something, and so this person was in the back seat, and she said, "Oh, I almost didn't get here. I tell you, I almost didn't get here. Satan was sure trying to get me from coming here." I'm sitting in the front seat, and I said, "Satan?" I hadn't heard that for so long. And then I said, oh, excuse me. Yes. And I turned and I said, "Oh, what church do you go to?" And she said, "Oh, I don't go to anything. I guess the Baptist. And I said, "Oh, yes." Then I said, I believe there's only one presence and one power, God the good. I always get a lick in. Stan Hampson, who's just a darling friend of all of us and the minister over in Palo Alto, has on his license plates, and some of you may have seen it, OPOPGGO. OPOPGGO. And you go in to get gasoline like that, and they say, "What's that mean?" He says, "One presence and one power, God the good, omnipotent." You can buy those, incidentally. We have it on one of our cars. It's, the holder for the license has OPOPGGO. And I love that. That's wonderful. Okay, that's one of our first things that we really get into consciousness, the EPers, right? All right. The second identifying song for unity is that God is within. The connection is within. God is everywhere. We know that. But our connection is within. And I think that's probably the single most thing that's meant something to me. Someone asked me a while back, "What's the greatest thing that you think unity has contributed to you?" And I said that God is within. Because, I grew up in the Congregational Church, and so many of us have in various churches, and God was always up and out somewhere, and I hoped he saw me, sometimes. And sometimes I just assume he didn't, but anyway, that was before unity. Yeah. So the God connection within is probably the most powerful thing that we can know about our life. And I love, we get so many letters in our television ministry, and we're putting them in book form now, in notebook form. We've got nice big fat books for each month, beginning. Fadine knows, I see her there smiling, and probably Francis too. And I'll tell you why we did it. We used to just kind of keep the letters in a file and then let them go. But Phil and I, when you sit down in a studio and you're just looking at a camera, you have to see more than that camera. You have to see you. And after 18 years, we're getting kind of good at that. We know you're there and we are watching you. But it's wonderful to read those letters. And so we've made it kind of a habit now to read our letters before the day when we go to we usually do several programs in one day. And it gets to be a little bit, you have to really keep yourself up into that presence. And there's a lady up in Seattle who's in her 90s, and she wrote this letter, and I loved it. "Dear Dorothy and Philip, I am so thrilled. I have been waiting for someone who sees the parallel of physical science with spiritual principle. You said it better than I could." She said, "Just think of atoms. If atoms are mind essence, we can arrange them according to our faith and imagination. Oh, what a wonderful discovery." About 1972, after my husband's death, he came back to me several times, both in apparitions, and she puts a question mark after that one, and in dreams. At that time, I knew so little about religion, had had precious little time to read until then, and I only knew not to ask for things in prayer, So my heart and mind were full of needing and wanting to know how to pray. One day I was so in need, I talked to God. I don't really know what spirit means, Father. I would like to live long enough to understand and to know how to pray. At that time, I found Unity and their books. I read and read, and I finally found or reached this place of no doubt. I loved God, even learned to love me and others. No doubt, exclamation. Yes. But being a questioner for so long, can you guess the thrill it was for me to discover there was an answer there all the time right within me? Atoms, all the atoms are mind essence. Oh, I like that. I have much to think about. Isn't that wonderful? And then there's another one that's just along the same line. I love these letters. And I thank any of you who are here who send letters to us. We read them, the staff reads them, we cry over them, we love you. It's Silent Unity, that's letter writing. And when I first went there as a very young person, I used to hug them and kiss them and tell them I love them, And it still goes on today, I think. I don't know, I'm not there, but better. Because it's real. This one, dear Phil, thanks for your lesson today. I love the image of matter being trapped light because it is easily seen to be quite mobile, making it seem quite possible that a mountain could be ordered into the sea like Jesus said. Is this also why he could affirm with conviction that I am the light, since that is really what our bodies and even our minds are made of? Yes, Lafayette, California, yes. That's exactly what it means. And so as we think now then about God within, that's the thing. And so just kind of feel that. And I loved it when Mike and Faith prayed because, see, there's such a lot of energy here, such a lot of love, just like you all know. And when we're together, it's easier. It's easier to make that connection somehow. At least it is for me. Another great song we sing, which is also the same tune, is The Power of Thought, responsibility and control or monitoring our thinking. And that, my dear good people, is a 24-hour job, as we all know. And it's so wonderful to learn how to say, no, I'm not going to think that. I used to do that. Well, I still do it, I guess. I start to talk about somebody or something, gossipy like, And then I'll remember and I'll say, no, I don't want to say that. And whoever you're talking to, they say, what were you going to say? And so there's always the world out there that wants you to get into that sloppy thinking and kind of go along with it. Nobody knows I'm just thinking it, all locked up in here. Don't fool yourself. What you are speaks so loudly, I cannot hear what you say, as the word is. And I tell you, our thoughts are very apparent. In this work, as I look at people, I've learned almost to know what you're thinking, but I try not to. I sort of feel that's your own private domain. I don't want to get involved in it because I'm so busy with my own. But anyway, the world today is telling us about quantum physics, the observer and the particle. And I love that, these particles that become waves if you don't catch them, But the moment you observe an idea, which I'm calling a particle at this point because I don't know any better, it stops it. And then it begins to form into whatever that idea is, you see. But I'm the observer, and I stop it, which is that creative process which is in all of us, and it goes with the thinking activity. When you start thinking about something over and over and over, praise God it's positive. Praise God it has a real ring of truth in it, because you've stopped that particle, and it's beginning to form and to beginning to come into you. Remember, the subconscious represents kind of a darkness. It's the storehouse, There's nothing bad about it. It's there. But the light in us illumines the darkness. I never have a house with a dark closet. I always want a house The closet has to have a light in it, because I know how easy it is to put stuff in closets. And it's the same way inside yourself. And so that light is very important. I love this. I don't really love him all the time, Calvin and Hobbes. He's such a smart aleck, and he has such a terrible time with his mother and father, but he's reading a book. Now, Calvin is the little guy, the little boy, and he's very beyond everything. And Hobbes is the tiger. I guess it's a stuffed tiger, but it's so real to Calvin that it really goes with him all the time. Anyway, he's reading a book, and he says, the more you know, the harder it is to take decisive action. Hobbes is looking at him. Then he goes, once you become informed, you start seeing complexities and shades of gray. And he gets up. Hobbes is still looking. He says, you realize that nothing is as clear and simple as it first appears ultimately. Knowledge is paralyzing. And then he throws the book away and he says, being a man of action, I can't afford to take that risk. And the tiger sits there and rolls his eyes and says, you're ignorant, but at least you act on it. I thought that was just darling. And that's the problem with quantum physics. You get into knowing so much, and we read so much, and there are so many things coming at us from all directions. I love the idea that Dorothy Pierson subscribes to a simple truth. One presence, one power, the power of thought, taking the action within myself, the God within, and then the power of the spoken word. That's another thing. You see, your thoughts are in there, and I can't see what you're thinking, and I don't want to know what you're thinking, but that's your business. But when you speak, you have now formed that thought, and the power of the spoken word is your creative power in your world. You are what you say you are. We were at a dinner party in Chicago a few years ago, and Phil will remember this. And there was a psychologist at the dinner party. It was a big kind of a formal thing at Phil's brother's house. And anyway, I was new to the family, and I was kind of trying to be very nice. And I was nice. And anyway, this man was entering into the conversation in this way. Everybody was talking about the president or the politics or the weather or the cost of living, etc., all this conversation. And this man kept saying, you say so, you say so, you say so. That's all he ever said was, you say so, And that just struck home so with me, because I am what I say I am. So what am I saying I am? What am I doing with this power of the word? Jesus, when they brought to him the request for healing, the centurion said, speak the word only, Master. And that is one of the secrets, really, of silent unity. It's that power of the spoken word, which goes into the invisible and reaches you. It's the capital W. The word was in the beginning, and without it, nothing was made that hath been made. The creative idea that God is. That's exciting to me, and that's a song. And then another one I love. Oh, I want to tell you just one thing more about that power of the spoken word. It's almost 8 o'clock. How long do I have? Okay. I've got another hour planned for you CEPers, so don't go to sleep. Anyway, so I just came out of Silent Unity, and I was kind of young, didn't know really very much about anything. That's the truth. And we went to Toronto with my young husband, Don O'Connor, who we'd gone together in high school, and we got married and went to Silent Unity together. And we were so dedicated. We're just open to the whole wide world. And we went up to Toronto to minister there. Now, Toronto's a very formal community, and it certainly was in 1943. As a matter of fact, some of the people even wore frock coats and striped trousers to church, So it was kind of scary. It was more than scary. I used to stand in the pulpit, and the perspiration would run down my arms and drop off on my elbows, And I was pretending like nothing was happening, you know. Anyway, one day, not too long after we went there, the phone rang and a woman called and said that she needed help and could she come and see me. Well, it was the very first person I ever had to work with. And so I took her in the little back room. It was a converted bakery. My career is very checkered. I'm back in a Safeway store now, you know, after 56 years. But anyway, she came in and she had with her her young son, and he was about 12 or 13 years old. And she told me after we went into the little room and she sat down, he sat down, I sat down. She said that he had been told at school that he had a very serious heart problem. They had gone to the doctor, and yes, it was confirmed that he had a very serious heart problem. He was very pale. And I thought, what will I do? And then I knew what to do because I had been trained in silent unity to speak the word. So I had them close their eyes. And with everything that was in me, I declared the presence of Jesus Christ to myself. And then I said, in the name and through the power of Jesus Christ, be thou made whole. And I said it again, and I said it again. And I didn't add much more to it because I didn't know much more. And they thanked me, and they left, and that boy was healed instantly. And years later, when I went back about 10 or 15, 20 years later, they came to church to tell me about it. I'd really kind of forgotten it. Now, I can't explain that. All I know is that if you can believe it, and if you can look right smack dab in the middle of people and call forth that living presence, which is the reality within them, like Jesus called forth Lazarus from the dead, when you can do that, sometimes, because there is a total relationship and nothing stopping, there's an instant healing. I always go for it. I go for the healing, always. Even when people are terminally ill, I'm trained in unity to go for the healing. Because even though they make a transition, they take the healing experience with them. And I always say they'll never meet that again in their eternal ongoing. You know, folks, it's real. And that's our song. That's our song. That's the power of prayer in silent unity. Charles Fillmore wrote, a company of persons gathered in the name of Jesus Christ can build a spiritual place in the ether and make it a continuous spiritual battery from which rays of energy and spiritual substance can be radiated to believing minds anywhere on earth. The Christ mind will take up its abode in such a center of spiritual energy and cooperate with the minds in it in broadcasting health, wealth, and spiritual understanding everywhere. That has been going on for over 100 years at Unity School, the light that shines for you. And I am so grateful to God for this incarnation where I could participate in that. I believe it with all my heart. And then the what do I want to say? The icing on the cake for this song is Jesus Christ. Now, I don't care if you're a Buddhist or what you are. There is a consciousness in the thought realm, the spiritual realm that surrounds this planet that relates to that overcoming, resurrected, ascended consciousness of one person who united himself so perfectly with the Christ of God, the image of God within, that it became synonymous. He said, he that hath seen me hath seen the Father. Now that takes not only a developed consciousness, it not only takes a call from God, an energy that comes up through the Old Testament, step by step by step by step, and finally is born in Bethlehem. It takes that. but it takes for you and me a believing in it. I don't care what name you call it. There is in the universe an enlightened consciousness. And for us to tune into it, all we have to do, folks, is to connect within, to relax, to trust, like we did in the prayer time today, and to let it happen. You see, that's what I call simple unity. Very simple unity. Joel Bear, somebody from Joel Bear's Center Church, I think in CEP, someone told me they were. Who's from Palm Springs here? A man from Palm Springs. I talked to your minister this morning, and she said for me to tell you hello. I'll tell her you aren't here. Shame on you. He's probably taking Jim Gaither's class, and he's so full up he can't come out tonight. Anyway, Joel Bear writes, and he's in Mesa. He says, folks, there is nothing in the world that is sweeter, cleaner, better, more effective, more gloriously wonderful than the unity interpretation of the teachings of Jesus Christ. Let me read it again. Folks, there is nothing in the world that is sweeter, cleaner, better, more effective, more gloriously wonderful than the unity interpretation of the teachings of Jesus Christ. They are simple and lovely for a child, yet empowered to raise you from the dead. We believe that, don't we? You YOUers down there, you 28-year-olders. I want to tell you, I talked to you last night, you're in your 20s and you were having problems with the fact that everybody seemed old. I want you to know, I really want you to know, folks, that they say, these folks that are very involved in mysticism and all that, they say that at 28, you make a tremendous shift. So look for it, okay? I got so much more to tell you, but it's time to quit, and I love you, and God bless you, and thank you for having me on Wednesday night.